Hello, welcome back to the From Way Downtown Pacers podcast from Indy Star. I am Nat Newell, Pacers editor for the Indy Star. I'm also the Colts editor, which is what my tag there says, and I forgot to change it, but we're not going to mess with it now. So hopefully everyone watching can just adjust that in their mind. I will fix it next time. Dustin and I haven't talked for a while. We had Matt Glennesk as our Pacers editor at the end of last season, but Matt has moved up in the Gannett chain. So if the Pacers don't make the finals again, it's his fault because they did when he was here. We have got obviously season starts Thursday. We've had a little bit of news here, so we'll start with that before we get to our season preview. We'll start with Cam Jones getting arrested for reckless driving, speeding, fleeing the police, I believe, which seemed a little contrived, but certainly he deserved. He certainly deserved to get pulled over. Let us be clear about that. Driving 90 in a 50 zone. He came out and apologized today. Rick Carlisle says he thinks it'll be reduced to a speeding ticket. Just real quick, give us the lowdown on Cam Jones.
Yeah, I mean, we'll obviously see certainly how that goes. Obviously, I only know what I've read from the probable cause affidavit. It probably wasn't the best idea for Rick Carlisle to weigh in on what he thinks the charges will eventually be. So I'm going to try not to make the same mistake and weigh in there either, but or at least too much. I mean, I guess his grander point is certainly resisting law enforcement certainly stands out as a much bigger charge. And I am not a legal expert by any means, but I would be kind of surprised if they stick with that one. But I guess I wouldn't be surprised if the reckless driving charge stuck, because certainly 90 is a high number no matter where you do it. And so I don't think anyone has attempted to even in what Rick Carlisle said, he didn't attempt to say, he wasn't really driving that fast or that's a lie or anything like that. So that obviously tends to get you something that at least gets you a whole bunch of points on your license. So we'll see what that happens. Obviously, the functional news, I guess, for Pacers fans is that they seem to be, sticking behind him for the most part. This isn't a fireable offense, based on everything we've seen so far. Rick Carlisle made a point of coming out and saying, hey, this guy's of exemplary character. This is not a thing that's, certainly normal for him. He was just late for practice and driving really fast. And it doesn't make me think that he shouldn't be on the team. He just makes me think he should slow down and leave a little earlier from wherever he was to make sure that he is getting to where he needs to be. So, they didn't have practice. He said he was late. I guess it came out as late for practice, but I mean, he didn't actually have practice. I think he's getting treatment. Certainly he hasn't practiced yet. But, rehab, all that kind of thing. So it's sort of being pointed as, all right, this is a good kid who, made a clear and obvious mistake that he should pay for, but, doesn't lead to, a dismissal or anything like that. And certainly shouldn't lead to, you wouldn't think, jail time. But all the same, still, a serious thing. And credit to Cam Jones for, apparently was very contrite all day Monday, talking to the team and whatnot. And then Tuesday, apparently Rick Carlisle said he insisted on talking to the team to apologize to them, and then wanted to say something publicly. And usually, somebody gets arrested, you don't hear from them about that for weeks, months, until, much later, if you hear from them at all. And in this case, Cam, apparently was at least up for the idea of stepping forward and saying, apologizing to the fans and the organization and just getting himself in front of a camera to say so and to own it and say, hey, I made a mistake. I'm going to learn from it. So, a stand-up move, I guess you could say, from Cam Jones to make sure that he expresses the understanding that, he should not have done that. So that's where things stand. I mean, I don't, certainly we'll continue to follow this story to see where it ends up, what charges are filed. But as far as how this is going to affect the Pacers season going forward, doesn't look like it will, beyond this.
Yeah, and the fleeing the police charge or the evading arrest, whatever it was, he apparently got on to the interstate and then got off at the first exit. Immediately stopped and was in the police report says he was not a problem at all. So that seems like, again, not that was he technically doing it. Sure. I'm not saying the police have done anything incorrect, but it seems like that's more of a whether it's a misunderstanding or him just trying to get
Sure.
to a safe spot to stop than anything else.
Yeah. I mean, a couple things there. I mean, obviously, again, that counts in the potentially charging things. I mean, I think you have to at least list that on the report if you feel like that was a violation. And then the next piece is, to give some of the machinations here. And before I say that, even thanks to Noah Padilla, who jumped on this case yesterday. Is one of our public safety reporters, did an excellent job on this, and also helping guide me through having a sense of what I'm talking about here. But Ryan Mears, I guess was a district attorney, will make a decision on whether that charge is actually leveled. I mean, so formal charges have not been filed yet in this case. So those charges are still preliminary. So we'll see what goes forward there. But yeah, I mean, I'll think about another case of it. I mean, if you know that part of town, it's where it's the split, basically, where 65 and 70 are connected. And I think, if I understand, the probable cause affidavit correctly, he was going westbound. So if we're talking, it's by where I'm at generally is, kind of like the rural street exit and everything coming from east of Indy going west, you hit that part where, you could take the split onto 65, I mean, that is a weird place to know when you're going to pull over when the highway splits. I mean, so he took the split on the 65 South, and then I think took the first available exit from there, which is Fletcher Avenue exit. I'd have to go back and drive it myself to remind myself it's not far away. I could go do that. But it's not very far. But I mean, I guess the idea is if you're moving really, really fast, and if you're a police officer and somebody's going 90 and you flash your lights, you would like some level of immediate understanding, and maybe it wasn't quite immediate. So we'll see what that leads to or whatnot, but it is kind of a tricky place if you're going that fast and doing something that requires you to be pulled over. It's an awkward place to decide where you're going to do that, I guess.
Which goes back to the fact that clearly he should not be driving 90 miles an hour.
No, the first thing to do to not end up in that position is don't drive that fast in the first place. That way you won't have to make a decision where in that split you pull over. So it's a weird place. Once you've made that mistake, it's a weird place to decide what you're going to do then. But that's why you don't drive that fast going there in the first place. So, but yeah,
we have spent enough time on Cam Jones, and let's move on to the other news, which is Benedict Mathurin not getting an extension, Andrew Naismith getting an extension. Why don't we start with Mathurin first? Just give the folks a rundown on what it means, sort of logistically, that he did not get a extension on his rookie contract.
Right. So they obviously still can go back and negotiate one at the end of the season, but basically sort of negotiations are cut off between now and at the day after the NBA finals. That's when you can start negotiating these again. They will still have they will have a couple benefits in this. At that point, one, you get between the NBA finals and June 30th, at 6 p.m. when the calendar flips over, to negotiate exclusively as the team that currently has it. Basically, you get to negotiate with your own free agents for a while before anybody else gets to talk to them. So that's where, they will get a chance to do that again. And so I think, as we've discussed the Benedict Mathurin conundrum since they drafted him on some level. And, obviously this is one of those inflection points in it. This doesn't mean they're going to move on from him. Specifically, this isn't a sure thing in that regard. But what it means is that they weren't able to come weren't able to come to an agreement at this point, and it would be hard to come to an agreement, because if you're on either side of this, the Pacers obviously are determining how much they want to go over the cap, how deep they want to go into the luxury tax. They already have core pieces in Haliburton, Nembhard, Siakam, and Nesmith, I think through at least the next 3 years on all of them. So, I mean, those guys are their core. And so it's like, okay, well, what do you want to spend for Benedict Mathurin if he's going to be your sixth man? If that's what it's going to be going forward, as they, when Haliburton comes back, if that's ultimately the role that he's going to play, if Nembhard is going to go back to being what he was, and Nesmith is going to go back to being what he was, and Siakam is still going to be what he was, well, there's not a starting job, basically. And you've seen how well Haliburton, Nembhard, and Nesmith work together. So it's like, okay, like if Mathurin is your 6-man scoring guard and the guy that steps in when somebody else gets hurt, well, what's the number you put on that? And what's the number that Benedict Mathurin could get on the open market? And that puts Mathurin in a tough position. It puts the Pacers in a tough position. Where do you even come up with that number? And now you might change your mind, and he might change his mind, and everybody might go in a different direction if he has a spectacular season when he's going to start every game. And if you feel like, okay, what he does is going to fit really well, and this guy is just way too talented for us to move, then you might make a different decision. Or you might be willing to spend more money. And so it's not an easy case if you're Ben Mathurin. There's a lot of ways in which the writing on the wall seems like this is a walk year for Ben Mathurin. He puts up crazy numbers in a tough spot. They don't, they either don't make the playoffs or barely make the playoffs. And he is sort of your classic free agent guy that goes off and, goes someplace else where he can score a lot of points and make a lot of money. It could go that way but he does still have the opportunity to make the case of, I fit with this group. You're going to have to find a way to keep me because I'm too talented for you to let me walk. Or they could do a sign and trade, a situation like that where they do eventually, get I don't know if it'll even be called an extension at that point, but, sign him to a new contract and move him at the same time and, be able to include a lot of money in that deal and be able to land somebody else who's really good. So it's a difficult circumstance because it's like I don't know that it makes sense for anybody to sign a deal right now. I don't know if it makes sense for Mathurin or that makes sense for the Pacers, unless the Pacers were offering a crazy number that would put them, well into luxury tax territory and into the aprons, basically, if you would give him the money that I would imagine Benedict Mathurin probably wants. So that's tricky, but I mean, I think they certainly by tacking on Aaron Nesmith for 2 more years, they definitely said Aaron Nesmith is our small forward. We don't know where Benedict Mathurin shows up in this, but Aaron Nesmith is our small forward. We like what he does. We believe he's got to be a piece of this. Maybe Mathurin fits in and maybe he doesn't, but we definitely want Aaron Nesmith.
I think the 2 points that stand out to me on the whole Mathurin thing is, number one, this hasn't publicly, at least, and no reason to think privately either, been contentious at all. It seems like both sides sort of understand where they're at. I think the other key point is that the Pacers hold most of the cards in this situation because Mathurin would be a restricted free agent this past season. Basically, the restricted free agents were, I say frozen out. That implies that there was some kind of conspiracy. There wasn't, but none of the restricted free agents were signed quickly or by another team. So the Pacers would still control whether they keep Benedict Mathurin at the end of the season, even if he signs with another team, because they can match the offer.
Right.
Now, the question here is he's been averaging almost a point a minute, shooting 68% from the field. So if he averages 35 points, shooting 68% from the field this season, you probably got to rethink about what you're doing with your lineup next year. Don't
I think so.
Be expecting that the preseason stats roll over. It's a 1-to-1 comparison.
Yeah, no.
But as you said, could there be some team that wants to quote unquote overpay Mathurin because they know what kind of ceiling he has? We could definitely see that, and it would be a different case than some of the guys who were restricted free agents this offseason.
Yeah. And I'm going to be fascinated by how this works. I mean, I've been interested just so far in what they've done in preseason. I mean, it's been on balance. It's been a rough preseason for the Pacers, but when their core 4 have been on the floor, they look really good. When Nembhard, Nesmith, Mathurin, Siakam have played together, it looks sharp. I think I've been really very impressed with how quickly they've figured out how they need to operate together and what that's got to look like. And it's sort of like everybody's got to kind of meet in the middle. And like Aaron Nesmith and Pascal Siakam need to do a little bit more off the dribble. And Benedict Mathurin needs to do a little bit less, but he still needs to score. But they've all got to move the ball with each other. And they've got to know where each other wants the ball. But like, it looks pretty well put together. I mean, if you just look at the numbers when just those guys are on the floor, they look pretty good. The issue where things look scary for this team right now is depth is rough. But when their best 4 are on the floor, that still looks like a playoff team to me. And so it's just a question of, getting TJ McConnell back and adding, getting Johnny Furphy back, getting Darius Walker back, eventually getting Cam Jones back, getting Quentin Jackson back, who I think might matter a whole lot more than we're even thinking about right now, to where this team ends up. And so, a lot of pieces need to come together for the rest of the team, but the four together look good, and they look good in such a way that it's making Benedict Mathurin look better. So, I think one thing that really struck me was we interviewed Mathurin, and asked him about, them getting together as a whole. And one thing he said was, it's understanding that when somebody takes a bad shot, it's not intentional. And he said, that person is going to get back on defense. But it was almost like he was saying that he needed them to not trust him, but just be like, okay, like, I'm not trying to hijack this, like, this is just how I play. I'm willing to move and change, but like, and I think Mathurin just has a personality that's not easy for everybody to read all the time. And I wonder if he was just trying to make the case, like, guys, I promise I'm not a bad teammate. I'm really not. And, I need you guys to believe that. And that there's been some level of coming together on that piece. And so, I thought that way he talked about that was very interesting. And I think he's just, the way he's played has been what Rick Carlisle is asking for, but it is a little different and provides him a little bit more freedom when Haliburton isn't on the floor.
Yeah. And I think it is really interesting that, I think obviously you're closer to it than me or anyone probably listening to this podcast, that there really doesn't seem like this is a situation that there could have been a problem. The fact that they're making a long run in the postseason both years, I think helps that. I think a vast majority of NBA basketball players, you don't get to that level unless you're willing to sacrifice when the team is successful. So I don't want to make it out that this is some shocking thing, but this could have been a problem. I mean, Mathurin could have wanted to do things a certain way, but it also seems like he sort of understands that he needs to change, he needs to maintain who he is, because that's what he can do. And that's a valuable trait in the NBA, but he also understands I do need to make adjustments. And it's just been a problem figuring out, not a problem. It's just been a process figuring out how he can change. And it'll be interesting this year, because I think certainly without Haliburton around, there's more, the window that he can fill is larger. And now that, of course, when Haliburton comes back, makes the decision even more interesting after he averages 35 points a game and shoots 68% this year. But it's just interesting to me that this has been, I guess, as smooth as it has been, despite there being some obvious, things that need to be, that both sides need to figure out.
Yeah, I think, and I think you got to credit Rick Carlisle for that. It really struck me, because when you keep going back to the same narrative over and over again and asking the same question over again, and you see how it develops, it's kind of an interesting thing. And I think this story has been one of those that, keep bringing this to Rick over and over again and see how he adapts with it. And, like every once in a while you have like, crack in the wall moment, not in the case of the issue is cracking, but like you get to see a window into it because you ask enough. And, last year when Haliburton came back, I think from his hamstring, and Mathurin had a couple games where he was really good, and then he was really quiet for a first half. Carlisle brought this up, that he's like, I when he hadn't scored at halftime, like I went over to talk to him and I said, like, I understand this is hard. And I think, and he gave us a whole explanation of like, I'm asking this guy to play two different ways. Like he has a way that he's built, a way that he's built to look at the game as trying to be a scorer and being fearless and going through people. And that doesn't exactly fit with what we do, except every once in a while when it does. And that makes it for a very difficult scenario, is that every once in a while I'm like, hey, I need you to just go. Like, I need you to just go be you and drive through contact and draw fouls and just be your one-on-one, just want to take on the world self. And sometimes I need you to move the ball and look for catch and shoot threes. And if you don't have them, pass. And sometimes I need you to do something that's kind of a hybrid of that. And like I think Rick had to, I think it goes a long way with Mathurin, that he acknowledges that that's not an easy ask. And I think he acknowledges that Ben's tried really hard, and that he has, like, that he's not refusing to do what Rick Carlisle is asking him to do. It is just odd to strike a balance because it changes. It's a moving target. There are games when they need Benedict Mathurin to just be, the guy that is, like hell bent for leather, just go, like, just, and just decide that he's going to the rim. And there are days when he's got to move the basketball because it's popping and everybody's getting open shots. And the thing that you don't want to do is have the ball stick in somebody's hand so they can drive. And so, like, he's being asked to be both of those people and try to make the read for what that is on every play and every quarter and every game. And it's a lot to ask, it's a lot to ask. And it's just, and he is, I think Benedict Mathurin has a pretty good basketball IQ. Doesn't have Tyrese Haliburton's basketball IQ, and very few people do. So it's a different ask for him because his, like, he can be bullheaded and sometimes that's what you want. And, sometimes it isn't. And so I think being gracious about that is really kept Rick Carlisle being gracious about that has kept Benedict Mathurin in the fold.
In terms of Aaron Naismith, he signed a very, I would say, a team-friendly deal previously.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this deal, if he takes any kind of step forward, which I think he has the possibility of doing, this is also, at worst, this is a fair deal for all sides. And there's potential for him to take a step forward and make it another team-friendly deal. Just what are your takes? I mean, where are you on the extension and what we're going to see from Naismith this year?
He's just a guy that just fits so well into what they're doing, and just being a guy that's, I mean, his catch and shoot numbers are excellent. I mean, his 3-point numbers in the playoffs were off the charts. I mean, he was at 49% and he hit the most threes of anybody in the playoffs. Anybody who played in the playoffs, he took the most he made the most 3-pointers. He hit 60. It's wild. He hit 60 in the playoffs in 23 games. Like, I mean, that's how on he was. And obviously the game that stands out is when he hits 8 of 9 and 6 in a row against the Knicks in game 1 and leads that comeback all by himself until Haliburton gets the one that the deep jumper that ties it. And Aaron still kind of thinks he should have got the ball there, but
well, he's 8 of 9. I don't blame him.
Just fair. He's like, ties the guy, but I was really on one, and I mean, he was incredible in those playoffs. But it's like, so you get that, you get the catch and shoot, you get the willingness to move the basketball, the ball popping, the sprinting down the floor every time, just absolutely adhering to the principles that that Rick Carlisle wants his wings to do. Basically, like in every way, like all of the complications for Benedict Mathurin are the things that Aaron Naismith does naturally, easily, without any problem. And he's an excellent defender, and he's the most versatile of the group, where I think Nembhard probably took the leap that you would say, Nembhard's probably the better defender, that he's the guy that you want on the best guard. Naismith, you can still throw Naismith on Giannis for a while. It's not the best idea because he's giving up 5-6 inches, but, Aaron Naismith will give it to somebody like Giannis. It will get in his way. We'll give it to somebody like LeBron, and you can move him around on bigger guys.
Brunson 2 years ago in the Eastern Conference.
Exactly. When they shifted him over, Nembhard was struggling in that, and they moved Naismith over, and that's the biggest reason I think they won that. I mean, he's capable of moving back and forth, and you have days when one is going to be better than the other, but like having Nembhard and Naismith together, just what that's allowed them to do defensively, and that they've just been so big of a part of allowing those guys to grow. For a while, they were the ones that were keeping the ship afloat defensively almost all by themselves. But they've risen everybody else's level. I think they've kind of demanded everybody else kind of come to them, and they've gotten better. And so that's made them just such a better defensive team. It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out this year because they want Mathurin to take on some big assignments. And so, Mathurin, I think those two guys will help Mathurin grow. They want to ease off on Nembhard's assignments so he can run the point guard without exhausting himself. And so, you'll still be asking a lot from Aaron Naismith defensively. And so, I think, his numbers and Naismith's numbers have to go up because somebody's got to take these shots, Mathurin. So that's going to lead to more points for Mathurin, but it's also going to lead to more points for Nembhard and Naismith, who are usually just perfectly willing to keep the ball moving. Those guys are going to have to hunt shots a little bit, not a lot, they don't want to go crazy on that, but Naismith's got to be willing to take a couple off the dribble. Where like an overwhelming number of his threes are catch and shoot. He's got to be willing to create his own a little bit, attack more off the dribble, hit a step back from time to time, just like they're not going to have the clear looks that they've had because they don't have Haliburton's gravity. They're not going to be as many double teams where somebody's scrambling and there's a wide open guy. They're going to have to hit contested threes and they're going to have to create space to make threes. So Nat Newell's going to have to show he can do that. And so you'll see bigger numbers and growth through that. But I think they just really, really like what they have with him because he just fits so seamlessly into everything else they want to do.
He's the perfect 3-and-D guy in a league where you need them and they're harder and harder to find. But I want to kind of back into the season as a whole here. You mentioned the core four being great and what's up with the bench. My question is, when they're healthy, if they ever get healthy, is the bench good enough even then, especially for the way they've operated in the past? Because we're talking, obviously McConnell makes a huge difference. Obi Toppin didn't play great in the preseason, but I don't think you worry too much about Obi Toppin.
No.
Ben Shepherd is a nice little player, but he's not he's not going to all of a sudden be scoring 15 points a game.
Right.
Johnny Furphy is 12 years old. What else where are you at on what's the best case scenario for the Pacers bench?
Yeah, I think you need to see a leap from one of those three wings, young wings, whether it's Shepherd, Walker, or Furphy. There's got to be one of them has to do a little bit more than they've done. They've been able to, and not that they've been, Walker's one story. Furphy and Shepherd have been what you've asked them to be. And I think the question is, are you going to ask for Shepherd to do a little bit more off the bounce? You're going to ask him to be a little more aggressive. And to what extent are you going to do that? And what does that look like? Or are you just going to let him keep being Ben Shepherd and, take wide open shots, pass the ball otherwise, defend, run, is that fine for Ben Shepherd or do you need some aggression? It sounds like they wanted to be a little more aggressive. And there's a good chance he's going to run the point as the backup on opening night. I'd be a little surprised if they put the ball in Taylor Peters' hands with the second unit on against the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's a lot. That's a big ask. Because it's a huge test already by just the defending champs, but their second unit's awesome. You're talking about
awesome defensively. Yeah.
Yeah. And specifically awesome defensively. What they are, they're a pretty good offensive second unit. They're a lights out defensive second unit. Their best two defenders on their bench are better than the best two defenders on a lot of other starting fives. If you're starting five and they obviously move this around, who is the two guard? If it's Shea, Jalen Williams, Lou Dort, and Holmgren and Hartenstein, and that's your five. Your second five is Caruso, Wallace, Caruso and Wallace, and Caruso, Wallace, Wiggins are your 1 through 3. Caruso and Wallace are as good as any two defenders in the league. So that's who you're dealing with. You're Taylor and Peter. No. No.
Well, I found that exchange it's. Carlisle goes up to him and says, "Hey, have you ever played point before?" And he says, "No." And then Carlisle says, "Hey, how about you learn on the spot in the NBA, even after being the 54th pick in the draft?" I'm thinking, and he played really well in that game, but that is not exactly the situation you want to be in, even if he plays well.
Not optimal. To separate two things can be true at the same time. Taylor and Peter had a great preseason. That's not easy, to do that. To step in, low rated pick. He was in Division II 2 years ago. In Arkansas Tech. He transferred down and then he transferred back up again. And he's a great story. He's a fantastic story. But I think his grit has absolutely showed out in this preseason. I've been impressed by, he has not for 1 second acted like he doesn't belong. And that's really I impressed me for sure. And he seems fine with handling the basketball. He shoots it really well. It's a pretty stroke. He's got a lot of nice touch on it. There's we go there after practice and obviously there's 4 buckets. And so it always seems to be the guys that are always shoot on the bucket that's closest to where the media is, where we do kind of the stand-ups right there is Taylor and Peter, Johnny Furphy, and Aaron Nesmith. And, there are days when Peter looks like the best looking shooter, and that's a crew of 3 pretty well-regarded shooters. You haven't seen it from Furphy in the NBA yet, but that's one of the reasons why he was recruited so highly as he was. But like Peter's just got a nice shot that's got a lot of touch on it. Like, basically like you're going to get, good bounces, basically. Like it sort of hits the rim and sort of glides in, I guess. I mean, it just, like very simple, soft touch there. And, very willing ball handler, very willing defender. He said, I've been better on defense than I thought I was going to be. This is the most I've ever asked to defend. He's more explosive than you think. He's a really good transition finisher. I mean, his numbers were really, really good at Liberty. Break down his shooting numbers. I mean, he was at like 75% on twos, like 57% or 45% on threes, 57.8 from the floor for a guard is really, really good. So like he's got a lot of potential as a scorer. He's a good enough defender and seems solid handling the basketball. Obviously it's going to get more complicated, and I think that's why you don't put him out there early. But you might be able to trust him in the future, in the not too distant future. So I'm like, he can be like, I don't think he's going to be the backup opening night, but he's probably third on the depth chart if Quentin Jackson is out for that game. He's probably ahead of. I think they trust him more than Ray J. Dennis. Even though Ray J. Dennis is the most experienced point guard at that position. I think they trust Taylor Peter on both sides of the floor more. So right now he's probably the third guy if they're going to let Shepherd run the point. And they, Peter might have to be, if Furphy and Walker aren't available, and Cam Jones is already out and Jackson's out, Peter might have to be, it might be Shepherd running the point and Peter at the two, rather than that preseason game. I think it was Peter at the one and Shepherd at the two. But those might be the two backcourt guys if Furphy or Walker are out. If it's even just one of those two guys, then that's might be who they're rolling with in the opener when they put out a second unit.
Johnny Furphy's looked good in the preseason, at least when he's not hurt. As I noted earlier, little known fact, he's got a phony Australian birth certificate. He's actually only 12 because that's what he looks like. Very tall for his age, though. So, still a chance. Do you think he can legitimately emerge as an NBA, bench player, an effective bench player this season?
Yes. I think the bigger question is, can he – I mean, I think when they're full, when they're healthy, he's the 11th guy. And, like if Walker's not playing good that day, or if the matchup leads to, hey, you want to run some bigger wings out there, then there's going to be minutes. But I think as long as McConnell's out, if Shepherd's the one, I don't think that Rick Carlisle, again, once he's healthy, should have any qualms about playing Furphy at the two. And what you want to have a good bench, to go back to kind of your initial question about how good this bench can be, is one of those guys got to score then. That's kind of what you're missing. Obviously, Obi can score and TJ McConnell can score. But I think you need a wing 2-3 guy that can put the ball in the bucket. And, so if like Furphy and Shepherd are just going to get their only buckets are going to be, running, cutting, stuff like that, that's not going to be enough. Like they're going to have to create their own some. And they're going to have to be able to hit some threes, be able to make some shots, to do some of the stuff Matherin's done in the past, So I think they like one of those guys, in addition to doing the small things that they generally tend to do pretty well, is going to have to put the ball in the bucket. But I think Furphy can. He hasn't been asked to do that a lot yet. Obviously, you have the highlight reel dunks when he's just slammed on people, and that's really impressive stuff. He's played with a lot of grit, a lot of fight. I think he's a lot better defender than when people thought he was going to be. He's put on muscle quickly, and I'm like, he is definitely going to be able to hold his own in an NBA game. It's just, I think you want to see the potential that I kind of show up for him to be somebody that can really, at least score as a second unit scorer at this point. He doesn't necessarily have to be a starter level scorer, but if you could be a trustworthy, get you, even if it's 7 or 8 a game, something along those lines where you can get just trust that there's going to be some point production coming out of him, that would help it. I mean, he can defend, run the floor, rebound, do a lot of the basic things they ask the wings to do. He's ready for that. I think you just need either, whether it's Furphy, Shepherd, or Walker, somebody's got to put the ball in the bucket.
What's the open position? Obviously, is center. I have been a fairly, I am very interested to see how much Miles Turner was helped by Tyrese Haliburton. He's going to go to the Bucks, who don't actually have any guards. A lot of guys who can shoot, but nobody who can, not a traditional guard.
No.
So we'll find out just how much of an impact Haliburton had on him there. And I've also been a believer that you can piece together Miles Turner with the parts they've got. Having one guy do it is better than piecing it together. I don't want to imply that these guys that the parts will be better than the sum of Miles Turner, as I butcher whatever that cliche is.
Right.
But the centers have not played well in the preseason.
No.
How worried should anyone be about that? And what are your thoughts on what happens at center with the Pacers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm waiting to see reason to feel like they should be confident as a group. And I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm not saying they can't get there. But like right now, did they reproduce Miles Turner in the aggregate in preseason? They sure did not.
No.
They sure did not. So I'm waiting to see. I think Isaiah Jackson's a good player. I think Isaiah Jackson, you feel a lot better when Isaiah Jackson's your backup. I think Isaiah Jackson was really productive in the role that he had, because he was, shooting 66% from the floor because he was getting a whole bunch of looks within, 2 feet of the bucket or an inch, or just dunking the basketball, running back and forth and just playing with a whole ton of energy. Like if he's going to be a starting 5, a lot more gets asked of you. There's a lot more to that than come in here and run wild for 15 minutes. Then that's a thing that much more fits his skill set. I think the muscle helps that he was able to put on through a lot of Raising Cane's and then some weightlifting was good. I mean, I think he's better built for this, but I mean, like he hasn't proven a jump shot yet. I don't think you can look too much of his numbers because you have to remember they did play Victor Wembanyama 2 out of 4 nights. That's not going to do well for your stats. The foul trouble is still an issue for him. It was an issue for him before he was hurt. So it's something that's obviously got to work on because you don't want in position where you're leaning on guys really, really early that, you had a preseason game when you're throwing Tony Bradley 5 minutes in, and certainly that's not the circumstance you want to be in. I still have a lot of belief that he can be pretty good. You want to see more from Jay Huff. It's going to be interesting to see what that looks like from him. I think, obviously he shot the ball, they're going to need to play him because he can space the floor in a way that nobody else can. And you don't want to take that off the board. But he doesn't have, he's got some explosion athletic ability, but walling guys off, not necessarily his thing. He's really good at meeting the ball at the rim, but it's a different story of keeping the ball away from the rim in the first place. Just being able to body somebody up. I don't know if you've seen that yet. Nobody's rebounded really well. I don't think James Wiseman, for as much size as he has, you're still kind of waiting to see a full level of connection with what he has to do with what his job is and where he's supposed to be from play to play. And Tony Bradley is solid at being Tony Bradley. Good for Tony Bradley for still being on the roster. It says a lot it says something for Tony Bradley that they didn't just keep campaign around just to do it. I think Rick has certainly been impressed with what Tony's done and still feels like, okay, that's at least a baseline. Waiting to see it from Wiseman, kind of waiting to see the rest of these guys come together, and don't ever expect Tony Bradley to be a dominant center by any means, but he can rebound, he can block out, he can defend okay, and he might not get you any points, but you can throw him out there and trust that he's going to make the other guy feel him. And so that was enough to keep Tony Bradley in the league. And so good for Tony Bradley, for continuing to get a shot out there. But it's again, you're not reproducing a whole lot of production there, and Miles Turner, but you lose with Miles Turner is a lot of production and when it comes to scoring and hitting threes. So they're in a tough spot there. And at the moment, are you asking me, do you think they'll reproduce Miles Turner in the aggregate? They haven't proven it yet.
No matter how many times I send Dustin the stats showing that they can reproduce Miles Turner in the aggregate, and but no, they still haven't done it yet.
Not they may have done it in different places together, kind of, but they have not done it in preseason.
Isaiah Jackson's
foul on the same team.
Isaiah Jackson's foul trouble is, I think, an issue that there are guys who are productive in limited minutes who can't make the jump because that's just the nature of their game. And maybe Isaiah Jackson's one of those guys. I have no idea. But I don't right now. He can't play more than 20 minutes a game just because of the foul trouble. So that's going to be a problem. I do like him like you said, as a backup because he rebounds, which historically he has rebounded at a per minute rate that is better than anyone else. The Colts. See, I got Colts editor on there. I'm looking right at it. The Pacers have had in recent years. And the blocks are fine. I mean, he's not like a super shot blocker, but he's a good shot blocker. But yeah, the foul trouble is a problem. Is the best version of the Pacers going to be? We've talked about 4 centers, but is the best version of the Pacers Obi Toppin at center?
Right now, I think it is. Right now, I think if you are, like that it's got like, it's kind of when you talked about, they used to talk about the Warriors as having the death lineup as having when you have Draymond at the 5 and, Steph and Clay and Durant. And I'm trying to think who was the Iguodala maybe.
Barnes was in there. It's Barnes at one point. Yeah.
I can't remember, but they used to call this like the death lineup of like, okay, like you can't guard this, and so whether it can defend or not, whatever, but they'll just run you out of the gym. That I think you saw some signs of that when you saw those 5 together, and so it's obviously how long can you do it? There are drawbacks to it, but I think there is a death lineup with Obi Toppin in it that can be really, really productive, I think. And if you're behind, that's the 5 I'd rule out there, and, I think that group will close frequently. I don't think they'll ever start with, I think they'll have to punt on a lot of stuff before they're willing to start with that. But I think they're willing to close with it. And I think you could see them closing halves with it and closing games with it. If, depending on certain circumstances, depending on certain lineups. But that might be the best they look, because offensively that group's going to roll. I don't know how it will defend when you put Obi in the back.
Obi is not exactly Draymond Green on defense.
He is not Draymond Green on defense. There is a sizable gap between Draymond Green and Obi Toppin at the 5 on defense, but he's at least trying. He's not great at it. He's trying. He's a better defender than he was when they got him because he cares. He's not great at it. You'll still, I am certain that you can send clips of like, look what Obi did here. Like, yeah, it still happens. I'm not going to act like, Obi bad defender is never a thing again. But, you see more fight, and at least it's in stretches. He might go a few games where he doesn't rebound at all, and then somebody tells him, hey, Obi, you better rebound. And then he has a stretch where he gets like 3 or 4 10 rebound games in a row. And so he cares about it. He notices. Again, he's never going to be Draymond Green, never going to be any other great defending 4 or 5 guy that you can think of. But he cares enough to get better. And so, I think you'll see a better version of that. And that might be enough for him to be their best option at 5.
We'll wrap it up with the big picture question here. I have seen people predict the Pacers to win 20 games. We just posted a wrap up of where the various rankings have the Pacers. I think Kevin Pelton, who used to work at ESPN, has a respected math formula that predicts wins, and had them at 45, which is just a huge gap. I don't. Again, we're talking an injury to Pascal Siakam changes all this, but if Pascal Siakam is healthy and Rick Carlisle is coaching the team, I'm not going to say I'm picking to finish 500, but I don't see how you go. How do you go much lower than 30? 35 wins seems like the bottom, like the floor for that combination, and that's before we get to the possibilities of the other guys around them. Right. How do you see this team? How do you see this season playing out right now?
Yeah, I think I answer it 2 different ways, because this group won't tank because these guys they're tested. They've been through it. They're not going to accept anything less than going all out at this. And particularly because that core 4 is operating so well together, those guys are going to be demanding of each other, of themselves. And they're going to figure out a way to win basketball games. games, as that core group of the guys who have been around, as the guys who have, stripes, if you will, as far as just being accomplished, soldiers for this group, the Neesmiths, the Nemhards, Neesmith, Nemhard, even Mathurin, definitely Siakam, and Toppin and McConnell, those guys all know what it takes for this group to win. They understand the standard, and they're feeling kind of pretty disrespected that keeps hearing this talk about gap year, and they're going to drive this team to be pretty good. That being said, like, the margin for error as far as when an injury is concerned is very little. And, right out of the gate, they're going to have a hard time. Like, if they're 4-6 in their first 10 games, they're in great shape, because that's how many McConnell's looking to miss. If he plays on November 9th, which is the next time I'm supposed to ask about him, then that's missing 9 games. And I presume that if Rick's like, ask me again on November 9th, that, he's not going to be ready on November 9th. That's the second night of a back-to-back in California. They're going to be in Golden State that night. And so do I think TJ is going to go from not playing 9 games in a row to, stepping up and playing Steph? No, I don't. But I mean, it could happen. Obviously there could be more progress there. And, Rick could be like, hey, actually, you don't have to wait till November 9th. TJ is going to play, 5 games in, that's not an impossibility. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't, like, obviously if it's a Siakam injury, it's huge. If it's a Nemhard injury, it's huge. Neesmith or Mathurin, it's huge. Any of those are big, but McConnell's significant. McConnell is significant because it forces the rest of that second unit to move around. And so, it's like, all right, well, again, like, I think their first unit is going to, give the Thunder trouble on Thursday. When that second unit comes in, and when Ben Shepherd's running the point against Alex Caruso and Kason Wallace, stuff gets hard real fast, and those core 4 guys can't play 48 minutes, can't be playing 48 minutes in October. So, like, they're that where I think, again, these guys are not going to lay down, and that is going to make them a tough out. They are going to try to make your life miserable. They're going to press you. They're going to run. They're going to try to exhaust you. And those core 4 guys are going to be mostly pretty successful at it. But what they ran out after those guys came out on the floor in preseason doesn't have a chance, and, again, like, they were missing a lot of guys. Now, again, different pieces come back. You get Walker back, you get Furphy back. I think Quentin Jackson is going to play a lot of minutes for this team, and he's going to matter. How much you get out of Quentin Jackson with this group is going to matter. And, particularly if he only misses a couple games, like, Quentin Jackson might be the backup point guard, in a week if he's ready. So, that kind of stuff is going to matter in terms of how much they stick around. But, like, what they were down to, by the end of preseason in terms of who they were running out there, doesn't have a chance against good second units. And, like, the first unit is going to have a crazy plus minus for them to win games.
So let me ask this question a slightly different way. Is the franchise better off winning 20 games this year or winning 40 games this year?
It's better off winning 40 if it can, because I think the best thing they can do is maintain a level of winning muscle memory. I don't think it's good for them to kind of jump off the treadmill and jump back on it and just imagine, beginning of next year when Haliburton's back, act like this season just didn't happen, and imagine they're still on the same role. Like, I think you have to maintain that. Like, you have to be fighting at that level. Like, you can get it back if you have the experience. I don't think there's any question about that, but it's better to not have to remind yourself what it's like to be in big games and games that matter in playoff situations than it is to have just done it. Like, it's better if these guys are still rolling and, you just throw Tyrese on a train that's already moving, and that's already got some level of momentum going, rather than them having to kind of restart it after a brutal year. Again, that doesn't mean that they can't do it. That doesn't mean that they can't win 25 games this year and win 50 next year. But, I think if you're the Pacers, I don't know enough about the draft class coming in. Maybe there's a 5-man that emerges that changes my mind entirely, and say, okay, well, you got to get that guy because you just can't play with what you have at the 5 right now. But right now, I think you're better off having these guys continue the momentum they have, maintain that muscle memory, and so they don't have to kind of remind themselves how to do it when they get Haliburton back.
Yeah, I would agree with you. History, I've looked at this as many different ways as I can figure out.
Mm.
If there is a transcendent player available, then you should tank, and you should do everything you possibly can to tank, because it's worth it to get one of those guys. If there is not one of those players, you're better off just winning. I mean, the other thing is, can they get low enough in the draft to really, or high enough in the draft, excuse me, to really find, to ensure that they're going to get that impact player? I don't think so.
Right.
Even 20 games probably doesn't get you. I mean, get you the 6th pick, the 8th pick, something like that.
Right.
Which is great. The other question to me is, you're going to find out. We got to find out about Walker, and we got to find out to a little bit lesser degree. We got to find out about Furphy. Are these guys, can one of them, as you noted, I mean, can one of them emerge and be an NBA player on a team that makes the finals? And then the other thing you've got Mathurin as an asset, as a trade, sign and trade possible as a restricted free agent. So I think there's plenty of. I think they're going to learn more about what they need. They're going to learn more of what they need by winning 40 games this year than by winning 20 and having if Siakam gets hurt. I just can't see this. If they're healthy, I can't see this team being that bad. No. And I just can't see a player. It is supposed to be a good draft class. I just can't see a player emerging, sort of, but I can't see a player where they're going to end up being worth throwing away the season for. Because I just don't, in general, I don't think that works.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a Wemby, like I think. The tough part, obviously, with Wemby and for everybody was you just don't know if your lottery pick, if your lottery numbers are going to come up, and so you don't know if you're better off or worse off. Teams like the Pistons, I mean, I guess it ended up okay for Detroit for a while. I was thinking, okay, maybe you're not helping yourself, but you still ended up with Oscar Thompson out of that draft, and that worked out pretty nicely, for them, and kind of they put together a solid team even without winning, without their lottery number coming up. But yeah, no, I haven't dealt. I know the DeBonsa kid from BYU is really, really good, but nobody comes in with the same level of rep that Wemby had. And so, yeah, you would love to have, if Wemby was in this draft, if you're the Pacers, you're like, I want that guy.
You see if Siakam wants to go become a professional photographer for a year. Somewhere.
Exactly.
If the equivalent,
to give you a sabbatical,
yeah, or even Cooper Flagg, you might want to do that, but I just don't see it. Again, like I say, the numbers show that becoming a really good team by tanking is really hard, and there's so many things that can go wrong. But hey, that'll be our season preview from Way Downtown podcast. Obviously, go to IndyStar.com for everything Dustin works on, and we'll be back again soon. Thank you for joining.